Welcome to another video tutorial. My name is Atenas and this is Mode Bespoke. For today I'm going to teach you how to crochet a pair of Tunisian stitch mittens. So this is going to be a Tunisian crochet pattern. Let's get started. So here are the mittens that we are going to be working on today, and these are Tunisian crochet mittens. You're going to need to know 3 different stitches. So you need to know knit, purl, and a simple stitch, because you're going to use the purl and the simple stitch for the honeycomb, and you're going to need the knit stitch for the rest of the mitten. These are one size mittens, so they are for adults, and you can adjust these, and we'll talk about adjustments at the end of the video. So for the supplies, we're going to need 2 skeins of this Lion brand yarn. So I found this just at Joann's. If you can't find this yarn specifically, I will leave all of this information and all of these details on the website so you can find it. It is a size 3 yarn, and we're going to need a 3.5mm Tunisian crochet hook. You're also going to need a few stitch markers, and then a yarn or tapestry needle and a pair of scissors. So this mitten is made of 3 parts. So you have the mitten, which is just the body of the mitten, you have the thumb, and then we have the ribbing at the bottom. Once you have crocheted all 3 of these, then you just sew it together and you have a mitten. So let's get started. So this is the body of the mitten, and this is what we're going to be crocheting right now. It's going to be one long piece that we're then going to fold in half to create the body of the mitten. For this pattern, you need to know how to knit and purl. If you don't know how, I'll link a beginner tutorial up here at the top of the video. So now we're going to have to begin with a chain of 40. So let's move this aside. And we're going to begin with a slip knot. And then chain 40. So yarn over and pull through 1, yarn over, pull through 2, 3, until you have your chain completed. Once you've completed your chain, we have to complete our foundation row. So for this foundation row, we're going to begin on the 2nd stitch from our hook, and we're just going to insert our hook into the stitch, yarn over, and pull up a loop. So insert your hook, yarn over, and pull up a loop. So cast on 1 loop for every one of the stitches of your chain. Once you've cast on all of your stitches on your hook, we have to begin a return pass. Now we're going to work a traditional return pass in every one of the return passes of this pattern. So they're all going to be the same. So for the return pass, we're just going to yarn over and pull through 1 loop, and then yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, until you complete the rest of the return pass. So once you have completed your return pass and your foundation row is ready, you're going to be left with just the 1 loop on your hook. Now, for the first row and all of the rows after that, we're going to work in this direction. So we're going to start with 6 knit stitches, and then we begin this design, and the rest of the row we complete it in knit stitches. So we have our loop already here on our hook, so that counts as this first stitch. So we begin on the very 2nd stitch, and we're going to knit 6 stitches. So we work 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So you will have a total of 7 loops on your hook, and you would have knit 6 stitches. Now for the posts, these are going to be double crochet posts. So you're going to work a post, knit stitch, post, and then 7 stitches in honeycomb, post, knit, post, and then the rest is all knit. So for that post, you're going to yarn over, you're going to insert your hook behind both loops of the stitch. So let me zoom in here a little. So here are both of the loops of the stitch. You're going to insert your hook right behind both of those. And then yarn over. And then we're going to yarn over and loop through both of these loops, like you're making a double crochet. So yarn over and pull through both loops. And there you go. In the next stitch, we knit. And then you're going to work another front post double crochet in this, then the following stitch. So yarn over, insert your hook behind both loops of the stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, and then you yarn over and pull through 2. And now for the honeycomb stitch. So we're going to begin with a purl stitch. So I'll start with the reverse yarn over, and then we purl in the first stitch, and you're going to Tunisian simple stitch into the following stitch. So you're just going to insert your hook behind that top loop of the stitch, and then yarn over and pull up a loop, and then you purl in the next stitch, Tunisian simple stitch in the one after that. And here we've got 4 of the 7 stitches already on our hook, so we need a total of 7. So for the next stitch we need to purl, and then we Tunisian simple stitch, and the last stitch is a purl. And now we just repeat the double crochet. So we're going to do a front post double crochet in the next stitch. So yarn over, insert your hook behind both loops of the stitch, pull up a loop, and then you're going to yarn over and pull through 2. We're going to knit, and then front post double crochet in the following stitch. Now for the rest of the stitches of your row, you're just going to knit stitch. So knit stitch all the way to the end of the row, and then complete a regular or a traditional return pass. So I made this last bit really short so we can do this together. So once you've completed the row, you're going to yarn over, pull through 1 loop, and then the rest of the row we yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, until we're left with just the 1 loop on our hook. So this is going to be the first row of a 2-row repeat. And we're going to complete a total of 26 rows in the same way. So let me finish this return pass, and I'll show you the second row of our 2-row repeat. Go quickly, quickly, quickly. Okay, so now we've completed our return pass, and now for the next row, we're going to knit the 6 beginning stitches. So as you can see, it's going to be, all of this section is going to be a repeat. The only thing that changes in this row is the honeycomb stitch, and that's so that we can give it the honeycomb look. So all of this is going to be the same. So we knit 6, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 6. Then you're going to get to our front post double crochet. So we need to crochet another one. So yarn over, and you're going to insert your hook behind the knot. Like that. Yarn over and pull up a loop. And then you yarn over and pull through 2. And then we knit, and then front post double crochet. Again, you're going to insert your hook behind the knot, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then yarn over and pull through 2. And now we're at the honeycomb. So in this row for the honeycomb stitch, we're going to invert our stitches. So this first stitch is going to be a purl stitch. So we have to crochet that as a Tunisian simple stitch. So just insert your hook behind this top loop, yarn over, and pull up a loop. This next stitch, we're going to work as a purl stitch, and then Tunisian simple stitch, purl stitch, Tunisian simple stitch, purl stitch, and then our last stitch is just going to be a Tunisian simple stitch. And now we're back to our front post double crochet. So we yarn over, insert the hook behind the knot, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then yarn over, pull through 2. And then we knit, and then we'll work another double front post double crochet, and the rest of the row are all knit stitches. So we'll finish the row. And then all you have left to do is work the return pass. So those were the 2 rows we're going to repeat. So you have the first row where we started our honeycomb stitch with the purl. So we did purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, and in a purl. And then in the next row, you work the exact same pattern up at the top, but when you get to the honeycomb, you start with a knit. So you start and end in a knit stitch. So repeat this until you have a total of 26 rows. So now to count your rows, let me grab my little sample here. You're looking at this at the side, you're going to see the stitches. The very first stitch is your foundation row. That does not count. Go into the second stitch, and that's where you begin to count. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, until you count 26 rows. Once you count the 26 rows, we're going to work our decreases. So let me show you here on this one, so that we can begin to decrease here the top part of the mitten, and then we'll be ready to close it up and start to work on the thumb part. So now once you've completed all 26 rows, we're going to start row number 27 with our decreases. Now our decreases are going to be the same whether you're crocheting the right mitten or the left mitten. Each of your decreases is going to go before the first double crochet, so this front post double crochet, and after the last half post double crochet. So they're going to be on either side of this pattern. So once you are on row 27, get to the 2 stitches before the front post double crochet. So get to these 2 stitches, and we're going to knit them together. So on the written pattern, you're going to see knit 2 together. So what you do is you insert your hook through the first stitch and then through the second stitch all the way to the back, yarn over, and pull up a loop. And that's it. That was your decrease. Now the rest of the row you work the same. So we're going to work the stitches all the way through to our last post, which is this last big post. So okay, and then knit stitch, and now we are at that second post. So we work the stitch right here, and we are going to knit the 2 stitches that follow that. We're going to knit those 2 together. So just like we did here at the beginning, we're going to do the same thing here at the end. So we're going to insert our hook through the first stitch, and it's just between the 2 threads that make up the stitch. So kind of like you're working a Tunisian simple stitch. And then you knit behind the second, or through the second stitch. So you go all the way through. And then yarn over and pull up a loop. And that was it. And then you knit the rest of the row. So whether you have the last remaining stitches here, which is just this little side, or you have this whole side, just continue to knit through the remaining stitches. So once you've cast on the remaining stitches of row number 27, you complete a return pass. Now row 28, you would work just as a regular row. So just go through and crochet in all of your stitches. So let me finish this return pass and I'll get right back here to where we did our decrease, and I'll show you how we're going to cast on this stitch and this stitch. So now for row number 28, cast on all of the stitches that you need to in order to get to where we worked the decrease. Now, when you get to the decrease, you're going to notice the decrease right here. So it's these two little stitches that we crocheted together to create a little bit of a V at the top, which is the row that we just worked for row number 27. You only have the one stitch, so you're just going to worry about this stitch right here. You no longer have to worry about the decrease right there. So all you do is you just continue to cast on stitches. So I'm going to knit here, and then I'm going to knit in the stitch right above our decrease, and then complete the rest of the row. You're going to do the same when you get to the decrease on this side. So you'll notice the decrease right here. So now the V is facing the other direction. All you do is you just knit on this top stitch, and then you just continue to move on. So that's all there's to it. So we've just completed rows 27 and 28. Now for rows 29 through 35, you're going to continue alternating between decrease and regular rows. So row 29 is going to be a decrease row, and then you go regular, decrease, and so forth until you get to row 35, which is a decrease row. Once you have completed your 35 rows of alternating decrease and regular rows, you're going to work an additional 5 regular rows. And when you're done with that, you'll be ready to work a return pass. So we are going to work a single crochet return pass, and for this, let me get this all set up. Let's zoom in a little. We're going to work behind the posts. So we're going to use the entire stitch. So much like when we crocheted the front post double crochet, that we used both loops of the stitch, we're going to do the same for the bind off. So beginning on the third vertical stitch, so skip the first and the second stitch, you're going to insert your hook behind both threads of the stitch. Then you're going to yarn over and pull up a loop. You'll have 2 loops on your hook, and all you do is just yarn over and single crochet. So that is a single crochet bind off. We're going to repeat this one more time. So go into the next stitch and make sure you get both loops of the stitch. Yarn over, pull up a loop, and then yarn over and pull through 2 to complete a single crochet. And then continue to crochet a single crochet at the top of the entire row until you get to the second to last stitch. So once you get to this one, you're going to skip this one. So crochet into this one, skip this stitch, and then you're going to work one final single crochet into the last stitch of the row. Once you've completed this last stitch, I like to close with a chain 1 to make a little knot here at the bottom. Tighten that up, and you're going to cut a really long thread of yarn because you're going to use this to sew your mitten closed. So cut a nice long thread, and then you just pull your hook and pull on the thread until you're left with just a single thread. So now we've completed our bind off and we're ready to start sewing our mitten in half. So for this, you're going to need a few stitch markers, and you're going to go to the bottom part of your mitten and you're going to count 4 stitches up, and this time the foundation row, there we go, the foundation row does count. So count 1, 2, 3, 4 stitches, and you're going to place a stitch marker on that one, and then we're going to count 10 stitches, and you're going to put a stitch marker on stitch number 11. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So this is going to be the thickness of, or the width of your thumb. So just try it on and make sure that your thumb fits, and that's going to be the width. Repeat this same stitch count on this side and put your stitch markers here on this side. Then we can start sewing the top of the mitten, and we're going to sew along the side. So we'll begin here at the top, sew down until the thumb section, and then we can begin to crochet the thumb. So now to sew our mitten closed, what I like to do is I just grab a yarn or tapestry needle, and then I make one long stitch from where my yarn ends down into the center of the mitten. So I'm just going to insert my needle here on one side and then just make one long stitch just so that I can get my thread all the way to the middle, or I guess to the center stitch of the mitten, and then I can start sewing from there all the way around. So this should be about the middle. So let's fold that. Yep, that's about at the center. And now the top part, you can sew this however you want. I like to join the ends here where we made our bind off. So that's the part that I like to sew through the top. It is going to be a little more square, but if you want to sew this a little more round, that's up to you. You can just go through and just kind of sew around the corners and then just make them nice and round. But I like how it looks here a little bit flat, so I'm just going to sew across the top. So let's pick this back up. And I'm going to line up all of my stitches here so that they're a little bit easier to see. And just to make it a little bit more clear, I'm going to be stitching along these top stitches. So it's these ones right up here. So if you turn your work around, it's going to be these bottom ones. And again, you can sew this however you want. You don't have to sew it the same way I'm sewing this. But I'm just going to start with a couple of stitches here at the top. And then I'm going to sew all the way across the top side of the mitten and down along the side until I reach those top stitch markers. So it's these ones right here. So just sew all the way down to here, and I'll see you again in a moment. Once you've sewn all the way across to your first stitch markers, you can either sew a little knot here and then just start anew here at the bottom part, or you can just stitch across, which is what I'm going to do. So I'm just going to insert my needle up here at the top, so where my top stitch markers are, and go all the way down to that second stitch marker. So it's just going to be one nice long stitch again. And don't pull on this too tightly or it'll scrunch up your work. So just leave it nice and loose but tight enough so that you hide the thread. And then I can just line up my bottom stitch markers and sew along these bottom stitches. So you can't see it very clearly because these stitch markers are kind of large, but stitch along here, so from the top where the stitch marker is all the way along to the bottom, and then I'll see you again in a moment. Now that that's all sewn up, it's a good time to try on the mitten just to make sure that the thumb hole is going to be big enough so that it fits you nice and comfortably. Once you see that it fits, you're comfortable with it, we're going to work on the thumb part. Now the thumb consists of 15 rows. So we're going to do a single crochet row, so that's just the first one. We're going to single crochet one in every stitch. The second row is going to have a decrease. So it's going to be a first decrease and it's going to be a 3-stitch decrease. Then we're going to work 2 regular rows and the rest of the work is going to be just decreases in every row. And that's going to be from row number 5 to row number 15 until you get here to the top. So let's get started here with this one. And I'm just using my same hook. And you can start anywhere on the thumb part. It doesn't matter. Just start on the same place in both mittens. So I'm going to start just a few stitches up from the bottom part of the thumb. And then just leave a nice long tail end. We're going to weave that in later. Pull up a loop. Then I'm going to chain one using both threads of the yarn. And we're going to drop that tail end we're not using. And we're just going to begin to single crochet. So you're going to single crochet all the way around. So I'm just going to insert my hook into the next stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then yarn over and close my single crochet. There we go. And I'm losing my threads here. So single crochet all along these side stitches until you get to the top. once you get to these top stitches, let me just finish. I think I've got a stitch or two left. There we go. So we're at the top of the thumb. You're going to skip this top little section and you're going to go straight into that next stitch on the other side. So skip here and single crochet onto that next stitch and all the way down along the side until you get to the bottom part of the thumb section. So now that we're at this bottom section, we're going to single crochet here. So be sure to skip that bottommost stitch and then just work all the way around until you get to that first single crochet of the row. So skip the chain one that we did, which is going to be this little one right over here, and work a single crochet directly into that first single crochet of the row. And that way you don't have to close the row and then start over again. You can just work in a continuous round. So now for the next round, work all the way around until you get to this bottom stitch. At this bottom stitch, it's going to be a little bit easier to identify if you use a stitch marker. So I'm just going to place a stitch marker right here. Then I'm going to work all the way around, just single crochet all the way around until you get to your stitch marker. So I'm going to work on that and I'll see you again here in just a moment. Once you get to these bottom stitches, so here's my stitch marker. I've got 3 stitches down here at the bottom, and these are right before my stitch marker. So I've got this one, and this one. We're going to stitch all of those together. So single crochet them together to create one large decrease. So, and that's going to be just the one large decrease that we're going to have in this entire thumb section. The rest of them are just going to be regular decreases. So I'm going to insert my hook into the first of the 3 stitches, yarn over and pull up a loop. And then I'm going to pull up a loop in the second stitch and then in that third stitch so that I have 4 loops on my hook. And now I just yarn over and I'm going to pull through all 4 loops. Just make sure that's nice and tight. And then we begin to single crochet again. So work all the way around another time. And this time you're going to work 2 rounds. So it's just going to be 2 rounds with no decreases. So this is going to be round number 3 and round number 4. And I will see you again at the bottom of round number 5. So I worked my way around for round number 5 and now we're at the bottom. And this is where we're going to work another decrease. So we've worked all the way around. And for the bottom part, we just have to do a 2-stitch decrease. So much like we did that 3-stitch decrease, we're going to work in a similar fashion, only with 2 stitches. So here are the bottom 2 stitches. So there's one and there's the other one. We're going to decrease those 2 together. So just insert your hook into the first stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then you're going to do the same thing in the second stitch. So insert your hook, yarn over, and pull up a loop. You will have 3 loops on your hook. And now you just yarn over and pull through all 3 loops to create that decrease. And you just continue working the rest of the row like you normally would. You're going to work a decrease in each of the next rows through row number 15. So once you've completed all the 15 rows, it's going to look like this. You've completed a decrease in every single one of them. And now that you're done, you're going to leave a nice long tail end of yarn. You're going to use this to sew with. So normally I like to finish my crochet with a chain stitch at the end so that I have a little knot. I didn't do it this time, so I'm just going to chain right here, just using my fingers. Make sure that that knot is nice and tight, and then we're just going to yarn our yarn or tapestry needle. So go through and just thread it through, and we're going to sew along the top. Now I'm just going to insert my needle into one stitch and pull it out through the following stitch. So then sew in and out all the way around the thumb part. And this is going to close up the top part of the thumb. So there aren't very many stitches here on the top. Once you go through and you close this top part, I like to go through and just sew across. So I make a little X at the top of the mitten. So not the top of the mitten, the top of the thumb. and that's just to make sure that it's not going to pop open at any point. So just go through, sew along this top part, and then make a little knot, weave in your ends, and then we're ready to begin the ribbing. And once you're at the ribbing, this part is quite easy, and if you've watched any of my other Tunisian tutorials, you've probably seen this ribbing before, so I don't need to go into a lot of detail about it. But basically what you're going to do is one row of purl stitches, so it's a full row of purl, and then a full row of knit, and then you just purl, knit, purl, until you have a total of 41 rows. So we're going to begin with a chain of 15. So just begin with a slip knot, and then tighten that up, and just chain 15 stitches. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Keep going here until I have 15 of these. There we go. And once you have all 15 stitches, you're going to begin a foundation row by skipping the first stitch of the chain and working into the second one. So cast on into the second stitch and then into every stitch of your chain. I'm only going to cast on into a few stitches here just to make it a little bit quicker. But cast on, and then we're going to work a return path. So we begin with the yarn over, pull through 1, and then yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, until you are left with just the one loop on your hook. So I'll try to work through this return pass quickly here. And there you go. So you complete your foundation row, and then you're going to begin a row of purl stitches. So beginning on that second vertical stitch, you just begin to cast on purl stitches. So you cast on one purl stitch for every stitch of your foundation row. So like I said, I've covered this ribbing in several of the tutorials, so that's why we're moving a little bit quickly here. So let's get this last stitch, and then you just work a regular return pass. There we go. And then the next row, we're just going to knit stitch into each of the stitches of the row. So beginning on that second vertical stitch of the row, you just begin to cast on a knit stitch. So now the length of the ribbing is going to be a total of 41 rows. So once you've complete that last row, which is going to be row 41, should be a row of purl stitches, you're going to complete a bind off, and it's going to be very similar to the bind off that we completed at the top of our mitten. So it's going to be that single crochet bind off. So let me finish this return pass real quick, and then I'll show you what that bind off will look like. This time we're not skipping any of the stitches, we're just going to work straight across. So every one of our stitches is going to get a bind off stitch. So beginning on that second vertical stitch of the row, you're going to insert your hook behind both threads, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then you single crochet. So you're going to do this in every one of the stitches at the top so that you can complete your bind off. Once you are done with that bind off, you're going to want to cut a really long tail end of yarn. So this is what that bind off is going to look like once you're done, and then cut a really, really long thread of yarn. You're going to use this to sew your ribbing onto your mitten. So make it nice and long, and then thread your yarn needle, and then you're going to sew that onto the bottom part of the mitten. So there we go. And you'll have enough stitches along the ribbing to match the number of stitching on the mitten. So just take it nice and slow and sew along just the top part. Don't make it too tight because the ribbing does stretch. What doesn't stretch is the seam. So don't make your stitches way too tight or way too close together, because then that will make the ribbing a little too tight on your wrist. But that's pretty much all to look out for when you're sewing on the ribbing. So now let's move on to completing, or I guess what you need to know to complete the left mitten, and then we'll talk about resizing. So in this tutorial, we crocheted the left-handed mitten. Now to crochet the right-handed mitten, we're going to have to switch our counts just a little bit. So when we began this tutorial, we started with 6 knit stitches, and then we began with the front post double crochet, knit, post, all of this design, and then we finished the rest of the row by completing a series of knit stitches. To crochet the right-handed glove, you're going to begin also with a chain of 40. You're going to begin with 20 knit stitches. So you'll crochet 20 knit stitches, and then you begin your front post double crochet, knit, post, all of this section, and then complete the rest of the row. So you should have 5 or 6 knit stitches here by the end, but it'll be the right-handed glove, and that way you have both of your mittens and they'll match. Now, if you need to adjust the sizing on this, if you're not very experienced and you don't want to change the stitch counts, which might be the easiest way, the yarn I used today was a size 3 yarn. So this was a size 3 and then a 3.5 millimeter hook. You can change your yarn size. So you can go to a size 4 yarn and then use a 4.5 millimeter hook or even a 5 millimeter hook. And that will make the mitten bigger without having to change any of the stitch counts. So you can still start with a chain of 40, and you can still do the same thing for the thumb and for the ribbing at the bottom. And that way it'll be a slightly easier way of making these mittens larger without having to change the pattern very much. But other than that, if you have any questions, just leave them down below and I'm happy to answer.
So that was today's tutorial. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down below. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, hit the subscribe button. I post videos every week. You can find this PDF pattern on the website, and I'll leave the link in the description box below. You can also follow me on Instagram if you'd like to see some more of my work. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to like and share if you've enjoyed this tutorial, and I will see you all again in the next one.